And not to put it in chocolate cake, that's where she made a chocolate cake out. I don't know.
Is that what's on your rock?
This is light. I'm going to leave this thing right back.
Hey, wait, stay here while I go first.
Really got to know you.
Hey, wait, better than that, stay here and I'll go first.
Oh, I don't trust you.
I wasn't either about strawberry cake.
See what I mean? You got me like
Lord, child, I can't believe you got
I sure do have to watch for you fixing to warm up there.
Hey,
Boy, you got a good memory, too. Right here, I'm going to have some pictures. I want you to tell me who you think they look like.
she thought it
They're
was
right here from
somebody.
Mark.
She thought it was her dad.
She thought it was her dad.
See what they say.
Thought she had died. And she was seeing her dad. Her son, she looked at her brother.
Look at it. Look good.
They kept us away for a while now. When I played, man.
yeah, okay.
That's real great bread. And this is... And your eyes, yeah, that'd be a great bread. That's Walker's daddy. He was in the army. See there, he's got on his army. This, Mama's car. That's my car. I'm enjoying this. See, it was him, then him.
Very good. That's good.
Charlie! He designed this car, and they put it on the big tankers that they used, and some of it, so they invited him to come to Washington. So he went to Washington, and they presented him with, and I said, a plaque or something, and the guys that they put them to try it out, they were there, that saved their lives.
Amen.
And, but he went to Washington, and I said, Brian, you want us to go with you? Oh, Mama, it's not anything, you know, we're just gonna do that. But he did design that, and it's probably saved a lot of people's lives.
Praise the Lord. I'm very thankful. I wish I wouldn't have to go down that road, but I'm thankful to what God still uses people and uses brokenness and uses things like that, and I'm so grateful that He would choose me. Rich Sam, I just want you to know, brother, publicly, I look up to you a great deal, and I want to thank you.
Well, bless you.
Praise the Lord. I'm grateful. How blessing it is to be able to get to spend time. And I just want to tell you, I love you very, very much. So it's, and she already got on me because I really haven't visited her since she got home. But it looks like it'd be the easiest place to visit. So I've already taken my lashing and I'm going to do better. So. So I love you very much. Yeah, amen.
In case you did a big apple on the Susie Q.
Charlie's garden. Charlie he called a big old elephant one time, and a big old key right beside it. And you know, the elephant was pretty, and he had that key hanging there, and they said, well, what's the key for, Charlie? He said, well, you stick it up his butt and on your trunk. Oh my God.
You rub his belly.
That's where we get it from.
Maggie's got one of Charlie's books in her back.
Good dog.
What Doris asked, what do some of you younger ones remember about Grandma Duncan? What do you remember about
Oh,
Grandma?
she was trying to whistle and sweep at the same
She always had to get that pocketbook in her earbox. Because they Grandma, you ride up the mountain. Let me get my pocketbook.
She was maybe in the summertime. And all we would ever do would watch Days of Our Lives, Doctors, and Another World.
Sister Sarah. She had her Sister Sarah.
She had 5 in service.
Reminds me so much of Hunter.
He does. He act
Just
like
talk about one
he wound up like one.
about possum.
Papa Swain.
He's got that tweaky bird and everything.
But the possum was one of our cousins on the daddy's side of the family. But anyway, he come up there and said, Mr. Manley, Mama wants you coming out the house just a minute. And he said, well, son, said, I'm fainting. He's up on the ladder, said, tell her I'd be down there in a minute. Said, but Mr. Manley, if you want, you come right now. And he said, well, son, I'll let me finish this and just tell her I'll be on down there in a minute. He said, but Mr. Manley, the whole damn house is on fire.
But something had happened here last year that meant the whole world to me. If I had been here, and if Rod hadn't been here, I still wouldn't know. As you all know, my daddy was killed in the war. And you know, as kids, you don't think about asking questions about anything. Do you get a little age on you, you realize, hey, that was important. I want to know what everything about it. But nobody knew anything about it. And I've asked members of this family, even some people here in this room who thought they knew, told me what they thought. And I think some people said, well, your dad was inside of a tank and he got bombed and he got burned up. He burned up inside of a tank. Well, I know that wasn't true because my dad wasn't in a tank. He was shooting against the tanks. So I knew he wasn't in that tank.
And he also, those papers right there was taken off my dad's body. So if he burned up in a tank, they wouldn't be there, right? Right. And besides that, I didn't want to think about my daddy burning up in a tank, right? So I asked members of my mom's family that had dealings with my dad during the war. And my Uncle Claude told me, he said, oh, your father, he was shot by a sniper sitting on a tank after the war was over. And my little brain said, wrong, that couldn't have happened because my dad was killed before the war. And again, my daddy was shooting those tanks and he wasn't in one of them or around them. So I thought, well, you know, everybody that thought they knew were wrong according to the way I was thinking. And I thought, well, I'll never know. Not on this side of the soil. I'll never know. Wrong. I'm sitting here last year at that table right there, and I'm sitting next to a cousin of mine who just turned to me and said, oh, by the way, Juanita, I was on the internet, and I found a guy that was with your dad when he was killed. On the internet. I don't know how many of you have heard that story or not have. Let's do that. I'm going to tell it anyway. He was, they were just casually talking on the internet, discussing things of the war. I think Rod Carey was a collector, I think, of things from the World War II, and he got in touch with an old soldier down in Sebastian, Florida. And they got to talking, and Rod said, I had two uncles that died in that war. And when he got to telling the names, he said, oh, I knew Paul Duncan. He was with my dad when he got killed. And I was able to document everything he said because I had letters from my dad almost every day that he wrote to my mother and myself. And I was wondering why my dad was in France one day and he was in Germany the next day, and a couple days later he was back in France. Why? What were they doing? What movements? Well, he gave me the entire troop movements of that 313th Infantry. And it jived up with every letter that I had from my dad. He had been pulled out of France and pulled into the Battle of the Bulge, survived the Battle of the Bulge, was taken back to France to retake this gun on wheels that he was shooting at these Russian tanks. And he had taken out several of those Russian tanks, and they weren't happy about that. The Russians weren't. So when my dad and his first sergeant went to get that tank back, and he got shot and mortally wounded, and the first sergeant was killed instantly. And it just blows my mind, you know, that here someone who had that information got together with him. Tell me that wasn't a God moment.
Amen.
Tell me that. Yeah, So we're going to go further with that story. There's a plaque on a wall in Germany that has my dad's name on it. And I have pictures of my dad's platoon. Probably my dad was in that unit when the picture was made, but I can't, it's too far away for me to tell. But he sent all sorts of valuable information to me. And my husband Jay and I decided we were going to go to Florida. We stopped and saw Brett while we were there, and we were coming back up the East Coast. We went to Sanibel Island and Captiva for our anniversary. We were coming back up, and I had contacted this sergeant, and I said, you know, I'd just love to come meet you, stop by and see you. He's got to be what, pushing 90? Has to be. And he's sounded very lucid. He writes, he emails, he's very up on all this stuff. So we had agreed to meet. And he said, just give me 2 hours notice and call me before you get to Sebastian. Give me 2 hours and I'll get ready for you. And I said, fine. So I had lost his telephone number. So I couldn't, I was supposed to be there on Mother's Day, and we got there one day early, too early. And so I was trying to find his number to call him because I had it with me, but I had lost it. I thought I had it with me. I found it at home 2 months later. So I stopped in a store and I tried to get his number and wasn't successful. So I said, JR, I got no choice. I just got to go surprise him. Well, I'm the one that got the surprise because he wasn't home. But so I missed him. But I went to a CVS drugstore and found this number and called him and left a message on his machine as to why I'm not gonna be there next day, Mother's Day. So, that's my story, and I just, you know, I'm so grateful to Rod. I'm so grateful Rod he just out of the blue turned to me and said, oh yeah, by the way, something I had been trying for years and years to find out. So I'm just happy to be here. I was happy to be here last year, and I hope, Lord willing, I'll be back again next year.
But he told me a war story one time. He wouldn't tell much till he got about drunk. And I was like, man, he wouldn't talk about the war. He'd sit there and cry and all that. He told me one time, he said, you know, he said one time, he said, we was hunkered down in an old farmhouse and said that we couldn't, had the enemy all around us shooting at us. He said we didn't have no bathroom or nothing in the house. Said we was caught in that house for a week. And he said the bathroom, the house was outside, you know, and he said everybody had to go to the bathroom. He said they'd guard and watch. They'd run out there and go to the bathroom, and then they'd watch them come back, you know, and they'd shoot at the enemy while they was going to the bathroom. Charlie said, you know, he said, them little boys in that building like beat me to death. I said, what they do that for, John? He said, well, he said, I had to go to the bathroom real bad. And he said, I wasn't going to go out that door and the enemy shooting at me. He said, I just squatted down over in the corner. He said, they all got mad at me and beat me up.
Tell the funny part where he said, I'd rather got beat up than.
He said, I'd rather got beat up than got shot.
This like you.
That is right. He never did sleep in a room by himself.
He scared me.
He sure did. I didn't put that connection.
I made a long time leading him around.
I also wondered why he didn't sleep in that back room.
That's how you retired early, wasn't it?
That's how he retired. That, between that and Darcy and Mitty, warming up their toilets.
That's Joe was already gone though. I figured Charlie would slept back
Nobody ever slept there. Grandma Swain would stay by herself until we got bigger. Then we finally, when we would spend the night with her, we could stay at her house. But if I was gonna spend the night with Grandma Swain,
You slept in
when it
bed.
was
Last year, I enjoyed this get together so much, and Nina and I call her Nina, everybody calls her Juanita. Anyway, we watched this video that Rodney made of us, and it just seems to me like it would be a great idea, because last year, it's all I heard was Charlie said this, Charlie did that. I don't understand why you all don't get together and put all this down, and so we can all, you can share all of this. Jimmy just added some more things that wasn't said last year, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other things that could be added about Charlie. So I'd just like to make a suggestion that you get together and put your notes together and say, this is what I got about Charlie. Charlie evidently is going to be remembered a long time. And I'm still laughing about the working on the light.
Some of them over there that wasn't here last year, so.
I don't know if any of them didn't hear it or not, but I went up there one time. Grandma's already kind of beginning to kind of go down a little bit, and she was in that hospital bed there. And I went in up there and I said, "Where's Charlie?" She said, "Oh, he's out there in the building working on the light." So I went out there, and you know that building behind Grandma's house. I went out there and Charlie's sitting there. He was drinking. I said, "Charlie," I said, "you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Grandma thought you was out here working on the light." He said, "I am a Bud Light." That's a true story. And he's the nicest guy. Every hair in place, dressed nice.
making him hot dogs.
But you let him get tanked up. He was a different person, wasn't he?
I went out there one time, Ricky and I went out there. Ricky was just a little guy. Charlie was about
Oh,
that heavy.
yeah.
had my fire mixed in a little coal heater out there in that building. I said, what you doing out here? I said, it's cold. He said, I want Mom to know I'm drinking. These old glasses already down like this, you know. And he said, I don't want Mom to know I'm drinking, so sit there a little bit. And he said, oh, Ricky, he said, the red, he said, I'd like to turn around there and hand me one of those red pictures out of that refrigerator. So old Ricky opened the door and he stood there, he kept looking. He said, Uncle Charlie, they ain't letting in here with a bunch of Budweiser.
I wasn't about to get one. I was sitting back there watching him.
Charlie and Joe were our mama's, and daddy's, two bachelor brothers. They never married. They always stayed at home with grandma, so that's why.
That's why they had a good life.
Yeah. It was their mama. That's what he would say, with his brother married Annie, but, and Annie waited on Charlie just like she did Cowboy, her husband. And that's why Charlie always said, oh, me and old Cowboy got some good ones.
I love it.
You have to decide for all this.
Mama said, Cowboy, you did get us a good old while. I remember Grandma Duncan would never leave, and I do the same thing. He laughs at me because I never will leave the house without my earbobs and my pocket purse. My earbobs and my pocket purse. That's right. I don't go nowhere without my earrings. I feel naked and lipstick. Yep. And there's some shoes.
I said, you'll take what your mama, but I ain't.
That little hair scissors was on. They all are.